So I'm Martin Page, and you probably can hear from my accent. I'm from Southampton, on the Hampshire, a bit of the OR. I am a bass player. I'm a songwriter. When I started off back in Southampton at 16 years old, I was playing football for Southampton Football Club, and then I fell in love with listening to Motown and the Beatles, and I wanted to be a bass player because my father worked for British Aerospace and NASA. And so I was going across to America a great deal and hearing some fantastic music down south, like James Brown and Wilson Pickett. And so I picked up the bass and I learned the bass, came back to England and joined some bands that were playing funk, like the Average White Band in Bristol and Oxford. And then eventually headed to London, realized that the most important thing in the world was songwriting. And that as a band, we needed better songs. So I really concentrated on songwriting in London. And eventually, with a partner I'd met in a band in London called Brian Fairweather, we joined Zomba Publishing in London. And we had a single. That's because they wanted to sign us as a band as well, called Dancing in Heaven, which became huge in Los Angeles in the 80s. Nowhere else but in Los Angeles. That made me come back to America. And on K-Rock in LA, that record was really big. And that made me, while I was in LA, start playing all my songs to A&R departments. And we came at the right time, myself and my partner, because it was the time of the 80s. And we were we were like Tom Dolby, Thompson Twins, Ultravox. And everybody wanted to change their sound then. So I found myself in the studios with Earth, Wind and Fire, my heroes, Starship, even the Commodores. And so I'm very lucky to work with Bernie Taupin at that time. And the first two songs I wrote with Bernie Taupin was We Built This City and These Dreams for Heart. They both went #1. So that meant I had to get a green card and stay in America. I was living my dream. And luckily, working with Maurice White of Earth, Wind and Fire, he got me with Barbara Streisand, and she and a lot of people who were working with wrote a letter for me. And I was able to get a green card, come into California, put the studio in, and I've been writing ever since. So I'm a bass player, really. But in my heart, I knew the most important thing to learn and what still motivates me is songwriting. And I've been here in LA writing from the 80s onwards, really. And you'd have to look at my discography because there's quite a strange bunch of people I worked with. I love all types of music. So we're talking Robbie Williams, Earth, Wind and Fire, Heart, Starship, Rock, Robbie Robertson as well, which was a great experience. So that's really, in a nutshell, my story to coming here to Los Angeles and being a songwriter.
So let's get this right. You're not Jimmy Page's eldest lad.
No, I tell you, I wouldn't have minded. I've looked into my past, and it seems that our family did come from Birmingham, and I think he did as well. And actually, I was rehearsing in London one day, and Zeppelin were next to us, and I nearly walked in and said, "I'm your long lost brother. Give me your royalties," but I didn't. But no, I don't think I'm anything to do with him, but I could be. Yeah.
I have a couple of things to ask you first. I'll tell him now in case I forget them. Senior moments.
You're from Manchester, right?
Manchester. I'm from Manchester. Yeah.
You haven't lost.
I haven't lost it. Well, people tell me, "Do you lose?" I've been in America 20 years, and people say, "Oh, you still get your accent." I said, "Well, the thing is, if I was 6, I might have had an American accent. Not at my age. I immigrated when I was 50, for God's sake." What I did know, a couple of things I'd like to point out straight away, which I'm not. No, I'm telling you, it's your career. Bernie Taupin. I worked with Michael Littman, who managed Matchbox 20, who managed Bernie. And I actually stayed at Michael's place in the Santa Ynez Mountains a couple of times. And one night we went to Santa Barbara to watch Bernie Taupin's band. Now we're talking the late 90s.
You're talking about the Farm Dogs, right?
I can't remember what they were called, but Michael said, "Should we go and see Bernie? He's playing." And before I know it, was in the car going down there, having a beer and watching him. But I can't remember the name of the band. Would you be part of that, or was that a different era?
No. Actually, it's interesting because when I got with Bernie, I was a huge fan of Elton John, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. So when publishers thought it would be a great idea for Bernie to write with me, because we were really being looked upon as the new age writers, new wave writers, and we were using technology, so it was synthesizers. And Bernie wanted to move into that place, which was, if you listen to the lyrics on "We Built This City," it's very, I can't see him writing that for Elton. It was really writing it for a very urgent and different kind of volatile lyric. And we hit it off. And so, as I said, in 6 months, we'd had 2 number ones. So he said, let me make an album with you. And we recorded I think it was his 3rd solo album called Tribe. And that was a great experience. But after that, I think it was more of a pop record. He said that his roots were country and western and more Americana. So I think he got with some of the guys from Rod Stewart's band and Family. And I knew he was playing in a band called the Farm Dogs, which I had nothing to do with. No, that's probably the band you watched. I think they were called the Farm Dogs. I'm still in touch with Bernie actually now. We just, after all these years, after 30 years, because he was promoting his book, we got together and we've just written two new songs together, which is
brilliant. Feel free to send anybody my way who wants to be on the podcast. It'd be amazing.
I didn't hear that. Actually, something's gone wrong with the connection again. I didn't hear that.
All right. Oh, I get it. I tell you the other thing I noticed. I mean, obviously you're kind of so you wrote the music and he wrote the lyrics, did it? Was that the kind of So you wrote the music to "We Built This City"?
Well, I think everybody probably knows this because Bernie with Elton, it was the same way. He gave me, he wanted to test me out. He wasn't sure it was going to work. So he gave me 2 lyrics up front. He always writes the lyrics up front. So suddenly my fax machine was chugging away, just like the old football results, and in came the lyrics. And the first 2 lyrics we worked on that he sent me as a tester were "We Built This City" and a song called "Boys in the Mist." And that was written for Stevie Nicks, but I didn't really want to sing the lyric "Boys in the Mist." I was nervous to ask him if I could change it, but there was a bridge called "These Dreams," and I changed the lyrics with his sort of accepting that. And so the first 2 lyrics he gave me were those 2 songs. That really sort of, and so he was, after testing me out, and that was the most important thing for me, Tony, was I just wanted to impress Bernie. And I did the demos on a little 8-track Fostex, and I still have them now. And Bernie, it's funny because there's been like I call it like a pyramid of great influences on me that I worked with. Couldn't have been better, like a triad. And it was like there was Bernie Taupin, who I learned a great deal from lyrically. Working with Maurice White with Earth, Wind and Fire was a great education in producing from the spirit. And working with Robbie Robertson, when he was doing his solo albums after the band, I felt like I had a great trinity of great teachers here. Very fortunate to have, lyric. I was learning Maurice White's spirit of production and how Earth, Wind and Fire got incredible recordings. And for Robbie Robertson, it was when we wrote Fallen Angel on his first solo album, it was about searching for emotion and spirit and music. So even though I was a pop songwriter, we were having the hits and I was working with a lot of people. I mean, it was non-stop. It was really like, I'm still in the same house I was working in. It was a factory, which was a great place to, like an apprenticeship. My dream had come true. And it was all different styles of music. But I do feel that I was very fortunate looking back now that the 3 people that really influenced me in my career were great people, good people. Good heart.
Yeah, I always find that, as we grow older, that gratitude starts to set in, once the roller coaster kind of what slows down. Because, I came from a different area in the PR side of things, but I learned from the greats. I worked with great managers, great artists, great labels. The Chris Blackwells, the Ahmed Ertegans, the Jerry Mosses, Herb Alperts, not the accountants and lawyers that kind of run the industry now. I tell you something else I picked up on immediately, Martin, is you were a Peter Gabriel fan as a kid. So when I listened to your stuff, I certainly heard an influence in your voice and your songs. Yeah. I was really impressed because I'll tell you this quick story about myself. It won't take long. But I grew up on Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and things. I was into progressive rock, believe it or not, I had hair, grew it and all that. And I didn't listen to Tamla. I mean, when you get older, your tastes expand and stuff.
Absolutely.
And for me, the English art school stuff began and ended with David Bowie. I wasn't into Genesis, and I worked Peter Gabriel 3. So I had to go to the gig to see him, and I thought, oh well, I'll be professional. I'll get out there. I picked up the lyrics to Games Without Frontiers. Hans plays with Lottie, Lottie plays with Jane, Jane plays with Willie, Willie plays with Ken. Oh, that sounds like that bloke with the flower plot on his head. And, you know, so I kind of went reluctantly to the gig. Oh, my God.
Yeah,
He's one of my favorite artists of all time. He is, apart from being a great guy, unbelievable, his songs and everything. And also for the cause, what he's done. He's made a difference, and that must have been, you know, what an education though. What, in your teens, getting into Peter Gabriel?
Oh yeah, you know, I was a art college student at, as I said, you know, the beginning of this, at 16, I was going to be a soccer player. So, you know, I was playing for Southampton schoolboys, and then the youth team got signed, you know, as an amateur, going to be, but I didn't. I just started to get into the, like you were getting into the hard rock. I was getting into Yes and Genesis as well, purely because of the kind of pastoral England sound that Genesis had. It was like going down the rabbit hole, like Wonderland. And I kept on going to America, and I was in the South with my dad because he was working with the Marines, and I was hankering for this English rock art stuff. And as soon as I saw Gabriel perform Watcher of the Skies on, I think it was a midnight special, and he came on with the wings and everything, and it was so ethereal and so spiritual, and it caught me at the right time because I was missing England. So I went back from Selling England the Pound right back to Foxtrot, Nursery Crime, and the 70s for me, even though I broke through in the 80s, the 70s for me were magical because we were musicians and we were playing, and you had Bowie with great theatrics, you had Alice Cooper, and you had Peter Gabriel bringing in this kind of William Blake English kind of spiritual element, and it was so marvelous and so groundbreaking, and that you could live art college, you know, you could have your long hair and you could play Tangerine Dream and Genesis for 20 minutes and go, oh my God, this is another place. You know, I've just been thinking deeply about that because I've been doing some podcasts myself about the 70s, and you know, we're talking, as you were mentioning, Jethro Tull, talking Stevie Wonder doing the funk, and we're getting you know, Genesis and Peter Gabriel breaking through. And I was very fortunate in later years to meet Peter. And again, he the biggest thrill I had was when Robbie Robertson said on Fallen Angel, the track I'd written for Robbie, he was going to England. You two were going to play some of the tracks with him, and Daniel Lanois was going to have Peter Gabriel sing my song Fallen Angel. So hearing Peter after all those years singing a song, you know, that I'd written with Robbie Robertson was, you know, I'd gone down the rabbit hole myself. It was pretty special. I was always a great fan of Peter's vocals, and I'm interested, you know, that you said that I sound a bit at times like that, and people say,
oh no, it's very powerful. The song was great. The and in the House of Stone and Light. I love the title.
Thank you.
It was really, and you know, I'm not patronizing you, trust me.
No.
But the thing is, it only takes one listen. It's instantly kind of, you know, catchy and you know, really good and everything.
Actually, I've got to tell you something. I sent the album to Peter.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and he said, I'm driving around Chile with the band, and he said, there's something about your music, House of Stone and Light. He said, it's just wonderful to look across landscapes, and it's very spiritual, great job.
Cool.
And I'm lucky to have Phil Collins played on that record, House of Stone and Light. So as a kid, you know, to be close to Peter and have Phil Collins playing on my solo album, I felt like I'd caught up a little bit with what influenced me as a kid, you know.
I'll have to throw in a little story of my own here. When I worked with Peter Gabriel, I mean, I was a PR guy, right? So
lovely man.
I took him to a radio. I picked him on, done an interview in Manchester, and we're driving to Liverpool, and we run out of gas on the motorway, or petrol, as us English people say. Who takes an artist like Peter Gabriel out on a promo tour without checking the fuel gauge? Come on, you know. And the other thing is, back home,
and I bet he was okay with it.
Oh, right? He was good. And I said to him, I looked at him, right, we were waiting for the AA, the equivalent of AAA. I looked at him and said, is this the kind of inspiration you get for songs, Peter? You know. And of course he pissed himself laughing. But the other thing is, I had a visitor's book at home, and Genesis came round on a Sunday after the, you know, before the gig.
Wow,
and we went out for a few drinks and a meal, and then Peter came, and I got him to sign the visitor's book. I've still got it, you know. And Peter Gabriel is signed right after Genesis, and what he put in the book was, before he signed his name, was, it's not often I'm under Peter Gabriel, I'm under Phil Collins. I wish I had it to
It's
show
actually
you.
funny because I said to when I was speaking to Peter, just I didn't know him like you did, but I met him and I said, "Yo, Phil Collins is playing drums on my record." He goes, "Right, good. He's not singing, right?" I went, "No, no, he's not." So I thought, okay.
It's funny though, talk about comparisons. When I worked with Genesis, it was the Duke album, and Peter Gabriel 3 were pretty much at the same time. And I remember going to Phil's hotel room, and you can hear this in his voice. He was a huge Steve Winwood fan. I think Ark of the Diver had just come out, and I gave him the album.
Oh, that's a great record.
And you listen to like Steve's voice, who's just a genius, and then Phil's voice, coming off the drum kit and singing like that.
Totally, and we're talking great soul singing, and you think about John Martin, and when Phil Collins was working with John Martin, Phil is
with John Martin as well.
Yeah, and so you can hear that soul, and I'll just tell another little story.
He's on Grace and Danger, I think, wasn't he?
I was in a restaurant and Phil Collins was sat there eating, and I was working on my album House of Stone and Light, and I had the Blue Nile, the Scottish band, getting involved, which I was
Blue Nile, yeah,
huge fan of them, and I made friends with them and actually brought them across from Scotland to work with Robbie Robertson. Well, they come across with A&M, but I heard their album and I just thought, this is outstanding. And so I'm watching Phil Collins eating, and I thought, I got to do it. So I got up to the table and I said, Phil, great fan, and wouldn't it be great if you played on my record? I've written with Bernie Taupin, I've had a few hits and everything. And then I said, I've worked with Earth, Wind and Fire. He went, oh my God, Earth, Wind and Fire. Oh, because it was the horns. And I said, and I got Blue Nile, right? Oh, Blue Nile. I'm in. I'm in. And he came across to the house the next day, just hired a car. I played him some tracks here in the house, and he was tapping out his rhythms on his knees. And then he came into A&M Studios and played drums. And Blue Nile came down to see him play the drums.
Great.
And he was so nervous that Blue Nile were watching him, and they shook his hand and everything. He's such a fan of Blue Nile. They left, and then he said to me, "Do you think they liked it? Do you think they thought I was good?" That's how humble he was. It was the thing for me, for Genesis and their management and everything. And as you well know, I just felt as a schoolboy, they were good people. I just thought, I know I could get on with them. They're into the music. They're into what they're doing, and they're good guys. I just felt it, and they were. And Phil was a beautiful man. Beautiful.
Oh, man. Phil was great. But if I saw him in a restaurant, I'd probably go up and say, "Phil, I'm a huge fan. Is it okay if you pick up the tab?" Different approach.
I think I know. You just spoke to me about nicking my royalties, and now you're asking someone to play for your meal. Bloody hell.
So listen, tell me, in case I forget to ask this, I'm going to throw it in there now. Robbie Robertson. I mean, I was a huge fan of the band, and such a great artist and everything. So sad when he passed away, but was he good to work with?
Oh yeah. I mean, again, I said to you, I had a kind of trinity of three people that I felt I worked with at the right time. You can come to LA in the 80s, and there's a lot of drugs going around and everything. These men were into their music and humor again. Robbie had a great sense of humor. All the people I worked with had a great.
He's Canadian though, wasn't he?
He was Canadian. I didn't hold that against him at all, because I've worked with Scots. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, but he was fantastic because he wanted to experiment, and what was great was, and I have to admit to this, is when Gary Gersh at Geffen Records said, "I'd like you to go and work with Robbie Robertson," I wasn't too sure what I was dealing with, and I wasn't too sure of the band. And my manager, Diane Poncher, who's been with me for 40 years, she pulled out Big Pink and everything. She said, "You need to get into this." But I'd grown up
manager.
Diane has been with me for 40 years, and she said, "You need to understand who you're about to work with, who you're going to go and see." And I'd been into Rag Mama Rag by the band, because it was pop oriented, and I liked that record, but I wasn't aware of the real depth of it, except for the night they drove Old Dixie down, because I was living in the South when that became a hit. But so I thought, when I go in there, do I have to wear a cowboy hat or something? Do I have to wear Stetson? How am I going to deal with this? But what was great about Robbie was he was very interested in what I was listening to: Cocteau Twins, Prefab Sprout, the Blue Nile. And my demos at that time were very, very synthesizer oriented. So he was intrigued by my sound. It took us 1.5 years to write Fallen Angel, because he was always searching for the emotion. And that's, but a beautiful man to work with again. I know this sounds, you know, like, oh my God, everybody's work was lovely. But Robbie was what he taught me was you had to, however long it took, you searched for the emotion in a song. And he played guitar on the single House of Stone and Light. He wanted to play on my album. And what I think was great about me working with Robbie is I didn't really know too much about his history. So when I met him, I was like, you know, this is what I do. This is what I love. Let's go to the Jupiter 8 and make some sounds. And he was intrigued by that. I think if I'd gone in there going like, oh my God, the weight, the band, I think he took to me because it was a bit like, let's do some music and get on with it. And I don't know too much about you and you don't know too much about me. And we went on to work on the next album, Storyville, as well, and which Stephen Hague produced. And I wrote with him on that. But again, I was known for writing the pop songs for people, and I just felt like deep down my depth was a little bit different from what I'd grown up with: Genesis, Jethro Tull, the Funks, Sly and the Family Stone. And so although I worshipped pop music and had to break through, I wanted to find myself in the studios with artists that I could learn from and be inspired from, and write some stuff that, you know, was more about me artistically, I suppose. Yeah,
I think that's great though, because you know, if you go into those things with that attitude about the, you know, the gratitude of being able to work with somebody and learn from somebody, because it works both ways. I was talking to somebody the other day, and he'd worked with everybody and done everything. He said, you know, I was looking, I stopped, I said, no, that isn't luck, you know, to work with these people. But the other thing I heard and I read about, which I mentioned to a guy who, well, he'd actually played guitar with David Bowie at Live Aid. And, you know, I said, the first question was like, let's face it, you weren't playing tambourine with some lesser mortal. You played guitar with David Bowie. But I read an article and a couple of years after Bowie died, and you'll probably, you know, resonate with this in as much as Mike Garson was saying, the great thing about Bowie was he didn't micromanage. He left you to it, you know. And the thing is, I'm not an artist, but, you know, in my own little way, I went out on the road with Bowie as his publicist around the Earthling tour. And the fact is, he was asking me if he thought it was worth doing this thing. And I was thinking, well, working with David Bowie is like being knighted. He's asking me for my opinion. You can do whatever you want. And I was like deeply honored, like you were talking yourself and things. And I think the great thing is like with, you know, for instance, like Mark Garson and Bowie's band. I mean, the mere fact, you'll know this as a musician, that you're invited to play in a band like that, doesn't it bring the best out in you as a guitarist, as a bass player, as a drummer, as anything?
Yeah. I mean, I had to learn, you know, because being in the studios with so many people and collaborating, you know, the English bands were coming to me, you know, with Go West and Paul Young, and so it's a lot of it is to do what we're doing, you know, have a cup of tea, let's sit down, how's your mum? And you know, that's how I saw Genesis and Phil Collins, and I always felt like the more we did it, it was more about relationships. And you know, the thing about Bowie and the thing about the work, everybody you worked with, is that they trusted you because they, you know, you can tell in a second your heart and soul is into the music. And you know, we grew up on vinyl, we grew up on the record labels, we loved it. It's magic. It's and so every time I was making music, I know this sounds corny, but every time, you know, Paul Young walks into the room, I'm like, oh, I saw you at the venue with the Q-tips and now we're working together. This is magic. Tom Jones came, you know, my mum was upstairs and she went like, I used to throw knickers at him on TV.
Mother, behave.
The same man. It's the same man. Yeah, mum, but don't give him your knickers now. Don't. But you know, there's a magic there, you know, I mean, that's why you're, you know, it sounds grand, but that's why we're here talking to each other, because it is, and I think with Bowie, all those great artists like Robbie and Maurice White would be saying to me, you know, what he'd call me late at night and say, you know, do you think I should be singing this falsetto or full voice? You know, it's, or that kind of humanity is what makes the music really, really special. I was lucky. I met most of the artists I worked with, they were, and I do believe this is true. I'd read it a long time ago that most musicians are good people. They're happy at what they're doing, and they're into this into the magic of it. Yeah. So there are some jobs where, you know, politicians, you're going to find like, oh my God, you know, this is pretty nasty. But most musicians I met most in my life have always been And also, I think with Bowie, we're all very fragile. We don't really know exactly why it's happening,
We
why
see
we do.
my story
Yeah,
is about working with people whose records I bought as a kid. I mean, that doesn't happen to a kid from the north of England, But I'll tell you
yeah,
something. In January, it'll be 4 years of doing my podcast, and I'm first to admit it's. I mean, my brand kind of moments that rock, is the premise
yeah,
being if I enjoyed the stories, why wouldn't other people? So I'm
absolutely.
reconnecting with people that I worked with 40 years ago and haven't spoken to them. It's like you're in the pub with them and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah,
But the
yeah,
other
yeah.
thing is, so that's me about my podcast. But you did a podcast. Did you do it for the same reason? Because you wanted
Oh yeah.
you love hearing stories.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I loved I loved records. I loved 45s. I'm doing a podcast now, just from this room, just for my group of supporters, isn't just for about going down the rabbit hole of all the records I love, and most of it's the 70s.
Yeah.
I had PJ Moore from Blue Nile recently because I've just finished a new album and he played on it. And I like you, I will do interviews on the Jack Hughes, a friend of mine with Wang Chung. It's more because I think I grew up thinking, oh, I'd love to be a DJ one day. I'd love to be spinning. But I love those old grey whistle test shows.
Oh yeah.
And when it was all like, and here they come, Bob Marley and the Wailers, they're going to play Stir It Up. And I was like, oh my God, that's just so, you could tell it was real. And people were into the music, they were into the story. So the first podcast I did called The Owl's Nest was all my demos. I just found all my old demos, and it was really great for me to pull them out and play them again and talk about how we did the demos. And some were good, some were terrible, but I would play them and go and talk about them. And I thought songwriters will get off on this, but now I'm doing a little podcast where I will pull out the vinyl and pull out the singles and go, oh, The Witch's Promise by Jethro Tull on Chrysalis Records. It looks great. It's green, so that's the enthusiasm that I still pull on, and although I broke through in the 80s and we were, I've still got a Jupiter 8 here and the Prophets and the synthesizers. My real heritage as a musician, I think very fortunately, was the end of the 60s when Motown were coming through, the Beatles, and the 70s when you did have Zeppelin and everybody was playing. So you had rhythm sections. As a bass player, I thought, well, I've got to be tight with the drummer. And it was a special time because it was the air. We were infecting the culture. Music was really, really important. It was a big thing to go to Virgin Megastore and go through your progressive rock albums and find a cover by, Greenslade or something, and my heritage is right across the board, very much like yours, progressive rock, reggae, big time. I grew up on Trojan records and, and pop. So to me, it's still, I can't really believe how I've made a life out of it. It's like that was something I used to go to the clubs and go, oh, one big thing that hit me was I'd be in there drinking too much and dancing at the top rank. And then I'd see the band Elevated playing. And I thought, it's much better. I'd like to be up there looking down at us. I think I want to be a musician, and I was watching Midnight Special when my dad had brought me across to America, and it was Steely Dan playing. And what a band. I looked at the bass player and I thought, if he can do it, I can do it. Of course, I picked one of the worst bands in the world to try and emulate. They were so good, but it's still magic. It's still magic to me. And you started me off on the podcast. I wanted to get sit here in the studio and pull out my vinyl and talk about, like we are now, just saying, has anybody heard the B-side of Witch's Promise by Jethro Tull? The Teacher. It's a great track. Let's play that. So it was me growing up on John Peel as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you probably kind of, I feel like, I always say that without sounding like the old geezer, that I kind of feel like I'm on a mission to help keep the legacy alive of some of the greatest artists that ever lived, And the thing is, when we grew up on that, there weren't, dare I use the word distraction, there weren't like computer games, there weren't social media, there wasn't so many things. It was like, I would go into Manchester with my pocket money and I'd buy like Led Zeppelin 1 or something, 9 o'clock in the morning, waiting for the shop to open. And they'd have stuff ready for me to listen to. And that was my social life. Then I'd go home, I'd go around my house, and I couldn't wait to turn him onto it. But I found it. So I have the bragging rights, you know what I mean? And it doesn't sound nerdy, and I'm not embarrassed to say it and everything. We have a few minutes left, so before we go, but there's plenty more I want to talk to you about. So I would like to reconvene at a mutually convenient time in the future, dear sir.
I'd love to.
Because I'm sure there's plenty more stories and stuff. Because I mean, Neil Diamond, I mean, your portfolio and stuff of different. I mean, you produced, you arrange, and you perform, and you write. So it's really cool that you dabble into a whole bunch of things.
Thank you, Tony. I think it's just what we've just been talking about, mass enthusiasm for every element of it. It was an escape for me. Music was, even as a kid, I had a great life. But if my mum and dad were rowing and I was playing T-Rex on the record, on the turntable, I'd see the family change. And so to me, I was like, what is this magic that puts people in a different spirit? And I think I grew up at a lucky time I believe it hit me in late 60s and 70s that I found just holding a vinyl record, looking at the label, and then I would be fascinated what Lennon and McCartney was, or Holland Dozier Holland. Who are these people that make it happen? These are the songwriters. And so for me, why I do everything, I think, is because I'm just massively enthusiastic about it all. Still in my loft.
Oh, I can tell that. Yeah, absolutely.
In my loft is still all the albums. When we finish talking, I can't wait to do a podcast because I actually enjoy playing these tracks and I get off and I just go like, oh my God, I've got the headphones on now. Listen to, how Stanley Clarke's playing the bass on School Days. It gets me going. Yeah. And it was an escape for me, music. It was I felt like if my parents were arguing, music made us all calm down. Christmas was great because we all danced to Slade. And then I started, like you, I started to go into the arts, art college, and then in came ambient music, and Bowie, Ziggy Stardust, and we went through into the Motown and the great funk that came from, Parliament in America and the great bass players. So to me, it was just like a tremendous escape from normal life, being sent there. My family, most of them worked at the docks in Southampton, and I was destined to be a docker if I wasn't playing for Southampton Football Club. So
right, love it.
Yeah, to me, music was like, but music is shiny, it's bright, and it lifts people's spirits. Yes, there's a mellow, dark side to it, and we all need sad songs because we're all depressives as as creatives are. But poetry, books, film, media turned me on, and I was lucky that it got me out from being, the docks working night shift. I just thought, I don't think I would be able to handle this too long. I still feel incredibly lucky because nobody's telling me what to do. I've got to motivate myself.
Well, that's great. I can't thank you enough, Martin. What I'll do is I'll finish with the kind of the close on the opening cue. I'll say, I was really impressed by you writing Whole Lot of Love, but we wouldn't be on the same page. Would we?
I'm very proud of that song. It's a great riff. And, they used it on Top of the Pops as well. I was very proud of it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, seriously, Martin. Thank you so much for your time, and love to have you back at a later date. We will keep in touch, sir.
I look forward to it, Tony. Thanks for a great interview.
Thanks a million. God bless you, sir.
Bye-bye, mate.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.